200 at the dealer.
Not 21.
Hello, my name is Thomas Frost. I'm a percussionist and student at Indiana University. And today I'd like to talk about how the guitar and percussion have a lot of crossover, and they're very similar. I would first of all like to dispel any notions of this idea. For an instrument to be considered a percussion instrument, there should be some sort of surface, some sort of membrane that we take an implement like a stick or a mallet or our hands and we play it, and then it vibrates. There's maybe like a sustain or whatever, but there's this vibration, and that is what classifies a percussion instrument, something that you take an implement with and you strike it and it vibrates. Yeah, obviously you could say the exact same thing about guitar. You know, you take an implement and then you strike and there's a vibration and there's a sustain and it eventually goes away. It's very much this sort of on-off like kind of idea here. The problem with that is you can just apply it to too many different instruments. So, you know, I could say like me using air to vibrate my vocal cords is all of a sudden a percussive attack. And, you know, while like you might be right and I can see your logic there, I can't really go with that. I think it's a little bit clear that there's a difference between singing and playing this, or breathing through a horn and playing guitar or playing drums. So we can't really go with that, okay? So that's not the explanation here. You haven't figured me out yet. It's the technical aspects of playing a guitar that is extremely percussive, not so much like the nature of the instrument itself. It's how you play this instrument that is extremely percussive. So for just a little bit more context, my studio professor says, hey, like, what was your musical background before you got here? And I'm like, well, you know, I played a lot of guitar when I was younger. I studied classical guitar. It just never really sat with me. I could never really get into it. But I was really drawn to the drums when I joined band in middle school. My professor, my studio professor at IU, was like, man, like, why'd you let that go? Like, you should have taken that and ran with it. You know, you could have been like a really cool instrumentalist if you had done that. And I was just like, well, dang, I guess I really missed out, didn't I? But then he tells me, like, you should play Electric Counterpoint by Steve Reich. I take him very seriously. I go record all the parts and bring it to him the next week, and I'm just like, hey, look at this, I'm gonna play guitar for you in my lesson today. And so he gets super hyped, and he's like, yeah, I want to listen to it, and he's like critiquing my guitar playing, talking about the balance. He's just like, yeah, but you know, what do you want to do with this? And I was like, well, I'd like to play it on my percussion master's recital. And so he's a little bit worried now. He's like, well, I don't really know if the administration would approve such a performance, because, you know, it has to go through different levels of authority for a performance to be, like, accepted, or for it to count toward my, like, degree. Like, is playing guitar really going to count to my degree? And my professor was afraid that, like, the administration would think no, like, that contributes to playing guitar as some kind of hobby or something, not as a percussionist. And so I was like, yeah, you know, this is bullshit. Like, this is very much a percussion instrument to me. This is the way I interpret it. So I end up recording a video for Electric Counterpoint. It's on my YouTube. You should go check it out. It's really awesome. It's dope. I kept thinking, like, what is it about this instrument that is so percussive in nature? So to go even further back, my first experience with guitar was playing Guitar Hero. And so if you've ever played Guitar Hero, the controller, it's a video game, right? The controller is this like small guitar, and it's got 5 different colored buttons on it, and then it's just got this one lever that you like can move up and down, and the notes are gonna come flying at you on the screen, and then you have to hit the right buttons and strum at the same time in order to like play the game.
Yeah, my voice concern is definitely at Seal by 200.
You know, Guitar Hero didn't really teach me how to play guitar, like at all. But it was extremely good rhythm training. It made me really adept at playing snare drum music. Seeing the notes fly at you in Guitar Hero is a lot like seeing the notes fly at you off the page in a snare drum context, and you just have to like hit them in real time, and you know, like it's very similar. Not only was one of my first experiences to playing Guitar Hero, but one of the first videos I watched on YouTube when I'm just like a little kid in like 2007, I see Andy McKee playing Drifting. It's like got one of the most views in the entire like history of YouTube. And if you've ever seen the video, he's like playing guitar and he's like slapping it and he's like doing all this percussion stuff. He's like tapping and like doing all this crazy stuff. And I'm just like, oh man, like this is awesome. So I like go to my like classical teachers and I'm like, hey, like, can you guys teach me this? Essentially, they were like, no, we can't teach you that because we can't do that. You know, when I say guitar is a percussion instrument, seeing Andy McKee like slap the guitar and use it as an actual like cajon, this is not what I'm talking about. Fast forward to my undergrad, I'm starting to play a lot more drum set. I'm in my school's big band. I'm listening to a lot of different kinds of music. I get really into jazz. I get really into funk music, specifically this band called Vulfpeck. They're just like super tight and really, they use a lot of cool syncopation, and they're just dope. The guitar player from this group, Cory Wong, really inspired me to play guitar again. A modern guitarist that isn't shredding a guitar solo and shredding like 5 different modes at the same time. Playing, you know, simple stuff and in a rhythmic fashion. Chris Thile with them especially comes to my mind. This recording of Beantown where he's up on the stage and you know they're just like chucking along doing the funky syncopated thing. And then you see Chris Thile like playing with them on the mandolin and he's just like crazy like herta rhythms, and it's just epic. It really showcases that there's some kind of rhythmic thing going on with the right hand. So there's this interview with Cory Wong. He explains how he uses his right hand as a motor and how people are really interested in the way he picks. Essentially, he does a lot of alternated picking. A lot of students will learn alternated picking when they like learn their scales. Like the way Cory Wong uses it, he uses a big wrist motion and usually strikes all the strings. Just kind of like lets the left hand let certain notes speak. Something like that. You know, if you're in a 16-note context, you would go down, up, down, up, down, up, 1 E and a, 2 E and a.
When I'm playing, I think of my right hand down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up as kind of a motor.
There's like specific parts of the beat that you would play a downstroke, 1 and then specific parts of the beat that you would play an upstroke on the E's and the 1 E and 2 E and
Some people ask me about like, oh, when do you do downstrokes? When do you do upstrokes? Anytime it's a 1 or an and, if it's a number or a downbeat, it's a downstroke. If it's an E or an it's an upstroke. I never think about my picking pattern because it's always this constant motion.
The same thing exists in the land of drums, and we call it alternated sticking. In order to play faster subdivisions, you know, we won't just play with one hand, like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. That wouldn't really make sense to do. You would just play with alternated sticking, you know, like in an idiomatic sort of way. Of course, you could do that, but like this is the way you would probably read a 16-note rhythm at a moderate tempo. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And so there's this alternated motion. The right hand or the lead hand, you know, it'll play on the ones and the ands, and then your weaker hand or your left hand or whatever you want to call it, the non-dominant hand, it'll play on the E's and the U's. This is intrinsically the exact same concept of playing an instrument, to alternate a motion in order to play a faster pattern or in order to play it, period. Even if he's playing like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E, even though there's no like ghost notes, no matter what happens, if it's a 1, he's gonna play it down, and if there's a he's going to play it upstroke. It's like the true alternated pattern, the true alternated sticking, where everything really does land where it's kind of supposed to if you were playing it alternated all the way. I go further into the Vulfpeck catalog and see that Jack Stratton, the leader of the band, has released a video series called Holy Trinities, where he talks about 3 different things that make up funk and Motown styles of music. The first thing is tambourine. The second thing is guitar, right? The third is like the arrangers, but you know, that's a different thing. So the way he talks about the guitar is he says that it's like a tambourine with a lot of different pitches in it.
It's not about a lead thing. You know, guitar is, I think of it as a tambourine with a ton of different pitches and a very strange looking tambourine, more or less. It's not a lead thing. It took me a while to get there because all the guitar god thing, it's all lead players. I had never connected with that. These are the rhythm players.
It's about laying down some kind of rhythmic grid, the way you would with a tambourine in a more popular, secular kind of music style. And so this really blew my mind at this point. It's like, man, if a guitar really is kind of like a tambourine, like, is there truth to this? I feel like there is. It was just such a beautiful interpretation that inspired me to pick the instrument back up. Not only is there these concepts of like rhythmic guitar playing, right? In the world of percussion as well, we have many percussion ensemble pieces that utilize guitar as a percussion instrument. Now, granted, most of the time they're playing it with sticks or they're playing it with their hands. No, you can't tell me that if you take a drumstick, hold down like a part of the fretboard and strike the strings, that these people aren't playing guitar, because 100% they are. For some reason, percussionists also can play guitar, can play basically anything at this point. Instead of calling ourselves percussionists, we should be called multi-instrumentalists. There's just really not a whole lot of crossover between playing snare drum and then playing marimba and then playing congas. And you can say, yes, there is, because you do it all with your hands, and if you understand rhythm, then all of this stuff overlaps. And then it's like, okay, if we're going to take broad statements like that, like the same thing with the guitar is a percussion instrument thing, oh, it vibrates, so it's a percussion instrument. You could just say this about anything. The real difference with guitar is that the actual method of playing it is extremely similar to playing drums. If you even take it further, you look at the way people play split hand technique on tambourines or candiras. This is essentially just guitar picking. It really is like a tambourine, a hand drum, with multiple pitches. Not to mention the crossovers of classical guitar playing with 4-mallet marimba playing. So, you know, you play classical guitar, and you know, most people, especially when they're beginning to learn classical guitar music, they would play with 4 fingers, right? The thumb, and then your index, middle, and ring finger, P, I, and A. If you were to arpeggiate a chord, you would play with your thumb on the bass. All these other fingers would move independently. With 4-mallet marimba, each mallet moves independently of the other ones, very similarly to the way your right hand, all the fingers are independent, right? And then, you know, with the right hand, there's kind of like a dedicated finger that plays the lowest string. And the same is true for marimba. Usually we have mallets 1, 2, 3, and 4. You would usually play the bass with mallet 1, right? So it's like we have 3 fingers over here and a thumb. The classical guitar literature actually translates very well to marimba. There are 4 implements that move independently. This is essentially the exact same approach for both instruments. I'd like to encourage more percussionists to pick up guitar and use it as their main method of studying harmony. We go into music school and then we have to learn a lot about music theory, and it's like, what's going on? Like, I play the drums. But I find that a lot of percussionists take a really strong liking to music theory and really love harmony. The only methods that we really have for exploring harmony in the most intuitive way with the instruments that we have at our schools is with keyboard percussion instruments. It's just so ridiculous that we're literally playing a giant wood piano with 4 mallets. Literally a painful process, honestly, that we've taken this idea of taking a stick and hitting it on something being percussion. Like, so ridiculous that, yeah, we're taking 4 mallets and we're playing like on this giant wooden piano. And it's just like, why would you do this when you can just play a piano? I'm not trying to knock marimba. I love playing marimba. Should it be our only avenue for expressing and understanding harmony? Definitely not. Do you have any shot at buying a 5-octave marimba? Pretty much everybody knows. A 5-octave marimba is basically the same amount of money as a new car. And so there was no shot. There was no shot that I was going to get a 5-octave marimba to practice on. Why buy something that's $15,000 when you can invest in something that's like $200 to $600, you know, depending on how fancy you want to get? You can buy one of those things and express harmony and still use percussive technique that you learned and embodied. At some point in my essay, I'm going to have to talk about some kind of primary source, some kind of scholarly, peer-reviewed journal. And, you know, I have very opinionated feelings about using these kinds of sources as they're stowed away in libraries that people outside of the university can't usually get access to without being a student. And so, you know, I definitely have some reservations about using scholarly peer-reviewed articles, but I'm going to have to include one anyways. So I'll include it right here.
My primary source will be Instruments Classification of by Klaus Waschmann, Margaret J. Kartomi, Eric M. von Hornbostel, and Kurt Sachs. Kurt Sachs? Yes. Published 20th of January 2001. This is the classification system of Hornbostel and Sachs. So essentially, it is an article talking about the classifications of musical instruments, and it boils down to 4 main classifications of instruments: aerophones, chordophones, idiophones, and membranophones. Aerophones being instruments, to put it simply, aerophones are instruments that you blow wind into or blow air into to produce a sound, like a trombone or woodwind instrument. A chordophone is something that has multiple strings that you can pluck that, you know, make chords like guitars and piano. You know, idiophones are, it's a little complex. They sound by vibrating the instrument. So, you know, like sheets of metal and different kinds of percussion instruments as well. Whoopsie daisies. And then membranophones, which are instruments that have a stretched membrane, like a animal skin or plastic surface that vibrates when you hit it, like a snare drum or congas. And so the classification of these instruments is very interesting because percussion instruments kind of fit in every single one of these categories, including aerophones. A lot of times percussion ensemble pieces call for the percussionist to play kazoos or to play melodicas. And so, percussionists get a good dose of every single one of these instruments. I mean, most traditionally, a percussion instrument would be classified as a membranophone. However, it's definitely also in the idiophone world. The guitar is in the chordophone world, but the definition of a chordophone, according to Oxford, is an instrument that produces its sound by setting up vibrations in a stretched string. And so if you were to say, if this were kind of like an idiophone, which is an instrument that gets its sound from vibrations of the instrument, like a sheet of metal, or a membranophone, something that is struck and it vibrates, all three of these categories are kind of crossing over into each other in principle. So just some interesting stuff to think about from the Grove Dictionary.
Hopefully one day, using interviews on YouTube will truly be considered a primary source. My backstory as a percussionist and as a guitarist is not primary enough, because it's just whatever I'm saying. Nobody has peer-reviewed my statements. So I hope you've enjoyed my video essay. I really want to encourage, again, just if you're a percussionist, pick up that guitar. Don't take it like it's a different instrument. The way you play and are expected to play millions of different instruments in the world of percussion, you should approach every instrument that way. But guitar is going to be one of the easiest ones to do that. And it's a lot cheaper than buying a 5-octave marimba or doing whatever you think you need to practice your 4 mallets. Playing guitar is more accessible. And there are a lot more teachers around. To tell me that I can't practice this instrument because it doesn't contribute to what I'm doing as a percussionist, it really is just wrong. Percussionists are expected to learn in school and understand how to do. We have to understand how to play different world instruments like congas, and we have to have some understanding of Indian music and all this different kind of stuff that nobody else ever has to do. Nobody has to learn about. And I love this about percussion, and I wish it could grow to be a much bigger thing. I wish it was a multi-instrumentalist major, because when you have to learn about a bunch of different world instruments, and when you have so many instruments that you're expected to play, you have to then understand the cultures that they come from. You have to understand the history of African diaspora, of Middle Eastern diaspora, why the drum set has a bunch of different parts, components that are from different areas. And you kind of have to understand the cultural context behind these instruments to really appreciate and understand the roles of these instruments when playing different musical styles. And so there's so much beauty to studying percussion. It's truly the multi-instrumentalist's major. And so if we're learning all this other stuff, I don't see how studying a guitar from a multi-instrumentalist, from a percussionist's standpoint, is not contributing to percussive education. It's not about being this virtuoso freak of nature who can just play everything. That's every percussionist, honestly. They're playing marimba, and then they're playing timpani, and then they're playing snare drum, and it's just a whole bunch of shit, A drum set player is literally playing cymbal, snare drum, bass drum, and hi-hat, all at the same time with 4 different limbs. If that's not freak of nature multi-instrumentalism, I don't know what is. And plenty of people play the drum set, and a lot of musicians that don't even play drums can just go onto a drum set and play a simple rock backbeat, and it sounds fine, So it's not I'm over here with my musical talent being everybody should just learn guitar because it's easy. It's definitely not like that. Definitely not everybody can just go play 4-mallet marimba. And even a lot of percussionists really struggle in that area and don't play it very much. But for the percussionists that are very well suited to 4-mallet marimba, they love doing it. So if a percussionist is very well suited to playing guitar, what's the problem? There are plenty of percussionists that independently study music of other cultures, or they study like jazz vibes, which isn't like necessarily a thing that one of my full-time professors at IU teaches. They don't teach jazz vibes, but they study it on their own, and then my professors nurture that talent, and they let their students fully realize their musical talent, their musical goals. It's not just this one thing, like you have to be a drummer, you know, you have to be the classical percussionist. Being a percussionist, you have a very lucid, you have a very sort of free room for what you want to study. Of course, it's a little bit different if you're trying to be an educator, you know, then we're going to study some things that'll prepare you to be an educator. But especially as a percussion performance major, the area that you're going to study is very broad, and you kind of have to specialize in a certain kind of instrument, or specialize in all of them, which a lot of people strive to do, and it's really difficult. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully I didn't come across as a narcissistic asshole. But if I did, please drop a like and subscribe.
I understand nothing about myself or anybody else. I wanna kick and scream and shout and fight and give somebody hell. Don't know, it would be God or my parents or just me. I guess I'm down to see, I guess I'm down to see.